Well, guys, take two. Good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this is your Red Pilled News. Hope that everyone is having a lovely Friday evening. This is very interesting tonight. First of all, the video was demonetized before we even said anything, and then as soon as I go live, my bandwidth gets throttled, and then my computer just completely dies. It's a brand new computer. Should not be happening. Something tells me that the powers that be do not want this program on the air tonight. So if you guys would do me a favor, please make sure you make sure you share this program. Patrick Ryan is my guest. Apparently he's very controversial. Not a big name on social media. But we'll be right back after a quick word from my sponsor, and we will talk all about it. Now, if you visit any of the great tourist spots in America, everything looks peachy. The gamblers and shows in Las Vegas, the restaurants and theaters on Broadway, the galleries and bars in Chicago are full. But look a little closer, and all is not well. You can't fail to notice an uptick in homeless and street people out there, and that's how it started last time. If you speak to them, many of the older folk were ordinary people who fell victim to the banks in their last crash in 2008, foreclosure and bankruptcy, and they've never recovered. They didn't want to be there, but they borrowed up to their limits, and when it all went wrong, they found themselves destitute and on the streets. The signs are all there that this is happening again right now. Car loans are at an all-time high, credit cards getting maxed out, and house prices and mortgage lending are skyrocketing. But just like last time, and the time before that, the stock market was overvalued and wobbling. Trust me, you're not going to want to be there when it all comes crashing down again, because the next one will take your savings with it. You need to put a precious metals safety net of gold or silver under those savings to protect them. Gold and silver are low-risk assets, and you can cash out again when the danger has passed. So talk to one of the specialists over at Noble Gold today and see how they can help you protect your family for what's coming. Click the link below to get the free gold guide, or call 877-646-5347 and tell them Red Pill 78 sent you. Or you can check them out at noblegoldinvestments.com. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for sticking around. Everybody who came over from the other stream, we are on a completely different computer. I had to start from scratch, and this is a real ghetto setup, you guys. So if you can just bear with us, I'm kind of getting everything tweaked. Hot mic. Okay, yes, I got that. Let me turn that down a little bit. Testing. 1, 2, 3. That's much better. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Like I said, I am just getting this set up and used for the very first time. It's not the same setup I would have used before, so I'm even adjusting my desk here. All right, so my guest tonight is Patrick Ryan. Patrick, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm excited.
I am excited myself. Okay, you guys, please let me know that the mic is okay now. Okay, somebody says, my mom is not here. Where are you, Mom? She definitely texted me, and I think that she said she was going to come back over. Mom, come back to the stream. So, yeah, like I was saying, Patrick, the video was demonetized before it began, and then how strange that my bandwidth gets completely throttled and is unusable when for like an hour and a half while I was testing it, we had a full gigabyte of bandwidth to be able to be used. It's a little disconcerting. What do you think's going on?
Well, quite a few things. Hello, everyone. Patrick Ryan here to talk about AI stuff. So it's rather interesting that they decided to throttle you 28 minutes after I posted on Twitter that I was going to be here. That implies that their rapid response team over at Google is alive and well and has me as a top priority. Now, that's a very strange thing to do, because I have about maybe 1,200 followers on Twitter, which is about the stock price of Google per share right now. And all that money can't seem to stop them from someone with so little follower count. Isn't that the weirdest thing?
Yeah.
Why would they demonetize you and knock the video offline and have your bandwidth throttled? Now, it's very peculiar because in order to do that, I'm streaming from a location. I can't tell you about it, But the fact that I'm streaming from this particular location could technically put Google in an antitrust scenario for interfering with this. It'd be
Really?
very concerning if any one of those 50 lawyers decided to look into my streaming location and decided, hey, now wait a second, why would they try to block anything outgoing from the corporation I'm currently at? That would be quite an interesting investigation. But more importantly, there's a person that the listeners need to be aware of who is now taking point in a lot of this censorship effort. I've given you the link, and if you want to drag the video, if you want to drag the website up, his name is, this is going to, I have to give a precursor here. This is high level, high court DC kung fu stuff. I'm going to try and break this down into something more digestible. Okay. His name is called, I'm going to mangle his last name, forgive me, Osakowitz, Mark Osakowitz. He's the chief of staff to Ohio Republican Senator Rob Portman, and he has joined Google as the VP Government Affairs and Public Policy in Washington. Now, that's important because you may have noticed it's the Republicans who have been pushing a lot of the antitrust and a lot of the complaints about censorship. That's mostly been a Republican-led effort, and the Democrats have been just kind of throwing their hands up saying, there's no censorship, right? So it's the rest of the world sees it as long as you don't have a donkey paying your bills. Now, this guy, he is brought in under the Republican radar to kind of cut deals, strike deals, and kind of get people to stop putting the heat on Google. What's most interesting about this person is the other link I've demonstrated is that he was, if you look at opensecrets.org, he was president of a company called Fierce, Isakowitz, and Blalock. During that time, I believe when he was president, there was another corporation who retained that lobbyist's services, and that was a corporation by the name of DynCorp.
Yes.
Does that sound familiar?
That
sounds familiar.
Very familiar, especially when we're talking about the crimes against children. DynCorp scores very big in that category.
Yeah, very big. I understand that Epstein and DynCorp have they enjoy the same aviation craft.
Yes, exactly. Shared a tail number.
Yeah, so Google retained the same firm as Epstein. Epstein didn't retain DynCorp, but there's certainly some curious overlaps between Jeffrey Epstein and DynCorp. Anyway, that's a fun little thing to throw out there. So if they're censoring us, this is most likely the result of that current appointment in DC.
Excellent. Well, Patrick, so let's help us make some sense of it. Let's start off with who you are.
Yes, I am a humble shit poster from the worst parts of 4chan who decided to specialize in AI warfare. And that sounds like a lofty umbrella term, and everybody has their own personal definition of AI. So what I tend to focus on is the more pragmatic things. Can I trick an AI? Can I quote hack an AI? Can I confuse an AI? Can I hijack? Can I convince that AI to be my ally? Those are the things I'm very interested in observing based upon many conversations with all different types of people up and down the power stack between politicians and military professionals and private actors and corporations. They all have their own budget outlays to where they put their AI spending. But what they're actually doing is they're bolting on this fancy technology, which is effectively data science and machine learning. And they're bolting it all into their current processes. But what they don't realize what they're doing is they're adding more attack vectors on top of their current processes. When it comes to AI security, it's not much of a thing. AI security is primarily what's called the law of large numbers. And that's nowhere near good enough. And I can get further into that over time. But I look at all the weak points of AI, the exploits, not just the technical stuff, but the psychological stuff. And yeah, that's what I do.
Well, the reason I think this is important is because AI has become remarkably sophisticated. I mean, I think that we're probably like interacting with all different types of AI on a regular basis, both on the left and the right, because I always say this all the time, like I have a code of not interacting with people who have just like crazy extreme, stuff that they're putting out there. You can tell when you see somebody who's like LARPing as a conservative and they're just putting out the most ridiculous, hate-filled stuff. And then, somebody who, maybe an AI LARPing as a lefty, trying to, get you riled up and just constantly commenting on your threads or on your videos, saying the exact same thing over and over and over again without fail. The first comment over and over and over again. So just trying to ignore it. But, this is why, because I know how sophisticated it is, and I know that they're probably out there trying to just, mess with us.
Oh, it's beyond a level of sophistication that most people, including myself, can even properly visualize. It all starts with the information we've been putting online for the past 20 years for free, whether it's chat messages, emails, our usage of our cell phones. All of the devices we've come to rely upon have been snitching on us since day one.
So you think that the technology companies have been harvesting our data the entire time just so that they could build their own AIs?
Not just harvesting it, but building it into their value propositions.
Okay.
Once you realize that you're collecting terabytes of data on people and you can extrapolate psychometrics from those people and the psychology of those people from effectively the footprints of what they've left online, you start to see that as not a liability, but as an asset that you can sell later on down the line. Whether that asset takes forever to formulate, that's another question. Maybe the technology isn't available to mine all the data that's being collected at the time of company formation, but 20 years down the line, it's more like a catalog. If you're familiar with the music industry, most of the profit that comes in is what's designated as catalog sales. So Frank Sinatra or Bing Crosby or stuff like that, things that get licensed out to every Christmas special you've ever seen ever since you were 1 year old. There's money to be had from the old data being resold and reused at a future date. The same is true about the data we're generating. All the stuff is basically collected and put at the exabyte level in data centers, and maybe 20 years from now it's valuable. Maybe someone who's doing an investigation wants to mine specifically down at that point in time.
What kind of data are you talking about? I can think of like the obvious stuff, what types of music we listen to, what types of food we like to eat, where we like to shop at the grocery store, those types of things for selling us targeted advertisements. But what other information are they harvesting?
It's more mundane than that, surprisingly. The type of metrics you're talking about are much more sophisticated, and you derive them from much more mundane sources. So whatever your accelerometer is doing, how are you, when do you interact online? When are you waking up? When are you sleeping? When do you speak? What are your sales habits? What is your spending habits? All of these things can be tracked. And that's basically the source that's being collected. Any type of behavioral trend, or not trend, but any type of behavioral imprint you can leave on a device, even the way you type, the speed in which you type at. If you type at 10 words per minute versus 90 words per minute, that's a massive psychometric analysis point. I can figure out your level of education just based on that alone, roughly. Right. So a bunch of mundane stuff that people be like, that's not real, that's not important. You're dead wrong. It's very important. Wow. Because by itself, it's probably not important, but think of it as an orchestra. A single violin isn't a beautiful, single violin's actually a gorgeous sounding thing, but you put them all together and all of a sudden you have this big, beautiful piece. And the same is true about data. You have multiple streams of data coming in by themselves. You can dismiss and be like, I'm smarter than them collecting my typing speed, and I'm smarter than them collecting when they wake up. You might be smarter for the first 5 points, but you're not smart enough for the next 5,000 points they're collecting.
Wow.
So
real quick, I just need to give a couple of quick thank yous. Floricio, thank you very much. She said Maxine Waters got heckled and confronted by conservatives. She didn't like that. The same thing she asked libs to do to Trump supporters. That's right. Karma. They are losing control. The truth will always win. Transparency and equal justice under the law. Unity is powerful. Q. Thank you so much for that, Flor. Also, Katie Good Q, did President Trump send a letter to Pelosi today? To be quite honest with you, I was doing IRL stuff all day and I didn't even look at the news. We will get into the news a little bit later in the program. We'll definitely check that out. Also, Michael Kenny says, thank you for not giving up tonight. 17. Thank you, Michael, for the super chat. Jeff Stewart says 5x5. Thank you. Dana Finkler says, howdy from Muffin County, Michigan, where we bark one, we bark all. Muffin's my dog. Then EO2 Dave, so many people having problems. Yeah, are other people having problems streaming today? I don't know. Like I said,
are other people?
Oh, there we go. A little bit of feedback.
My bad.
At least it's working, right?
Yes.
Oh, good God. So yeah, a little bit stressful. So okay. Well, you've hinted that you're doing something, but you can't tell us what it is. But I mean, you did drop a location. Do you realize that you said where you were?
Where did I say?
Well, I didn't want to say it on the air in case you didn't mean to say it.
No, if I did I say it on the air?
You said Washington, D.C.
Oh no, I was there.
Oh,
recently.
you were there.
Not there. No,
you were there.
That's the past.
Okay, all right.
I was there recently. Where I'm at right now, I can't reveal, but the people who blocked this certainly know where I'm at.
Yeah,
and that's going to cause some problems later down the line.
Did you go to Washington, D.C. to testify or to speak in front of any elected officials?
Elected officials? No, not quite.
Who are you speaking?
Not elected at all. You'll find out. But it's enough for Google to want to rapidly appoint someone at the GOP level. Just put it like that.
Oh, so when you were saying this new hire, how recent was that new hire?
That was about 4 days ago.
4 days ago. Okay. All right. So that's actually very quick. I would not expect for them to hire a Republican lobbyist or somebody with Republican clothing on, I guess.
I would.
But yeah, so this was a very stressful stream to get going because never has it happened like that before. I mean, I've had my bandwidth drop, and I usually just cycle and then come back and everything works. But now my computer's not working at all. I need to take it into the shop tomorrow. There are still others on the other stream, and I'm not able to text them to inform them of the new stream. Really,
guys, bring them over.
Yeah,
let them know. Jump the other stream. Jump in the chat. Tell them jump over.
They shouldn't be over there because oh, you know what? I bet you it's replaying. Sorry about that, guys. Like I said, this has been a bit of a stressful stream to get started. So, Patrick, when we met the first time, you had told me this pretty amazing story about your own personal experience with AI and kind of gaming it. I titled the show, Patrick Ryan, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Game AI, like thinking about Dr. Strangelove, loving the bomb. Let me see here. I am upcoming. Let me just cancel this. Delete. Why did it post 2 streams? That's very strange. So yeah, I was wondering if you could you could tell us that story again for the audience, and we can kind of get the idea of a ways that an AI can be used.
Right. So whenever we tell stories about what is coming down the pipe or what we believe is coming down the pipe, we like to default to our own human characteristics and our own human understanding of things. We like to think in terms of kind of grand stories and epics, like the great villain and the great hero. This is very apparent in AI as well when we're speaking about, if I mentioned The Terminator by James Cameron, for example, that's a very common trope. That's like generational. And that's been a fear that dates all the way back to Frankenstein, really, hundreds of years, 100 years at least. You see a lot of concern about robots replacing labor. This is an ongoing fear in a lot of advanced economies. And that's kind of been dominating the narrative significantly for multiple generations. But that's really not the biggest problem. If jobs are being replaced, it's very downstream, meaning if jobs are being replaced, it's because other people have been replacing them for a long time. If we're concerned about jobs being replaced, then why are we allowing cheap labor from other nations into our country if that's our primary concern? Right?
Yeah, I think that's a much bigger concern.
Right. That's much bigger. And There are people who get kickbacks from that, and there's political corruption around that all day long. I mean, if you're concerned about having your jobs taken, there's a place to actually start and concern yourself with that's tangible and you can get results from. But when it comes to AI, it's more important to think about the limitations of AI, which are not really sold very well. AI is always sold as this super sexy solution. It's going to solve all your problems. It's going to do all these things. It's your personal assistant. It's going to drive you to wherever you want to go. It's going to be amazing, right? The future's bright and super. That's all marketing hype. The moment you even try to turn on any AI process from the beginning, you have to train it for starters. So it's not like hit button, get, magic wizard. It doesn't work like that at all. You have to train the damn thing. So it's no different than a human in that regard. If I want someone to be aware of some obscure pattern of culture in Bangladesh, I have to teach you on that culture. I have to teach you on how the people interact, the fashions they wear, the way they speak, the rituals they engage in. This very obscure stuff. I have to train you in how to understand that situation. The same is true about AI, and how you train the AI significantly impacts its limitations. And there's always limitations, no matter what AI you implement. There's always going to be limitations. And I focus primarily on defining and representing those limitations. And it's difficult because those limitations aren't in the code. They're not in the data. There are things you have to infer. There are things that are missing. Via negativa, you have to establish what isn't represented. It's about what's missing, not what's actually there. Okay. And that's how you find the weaknesses.
And you specifically through the use of a bot army, basically an AI army, you what is it that you did? This was during Comicsgate or something like that, like
Comicsgate, Gamergate.
That's it. Comicsgate is ongoing. Sorry.
Yeah, it's ongoing. It's very relevant. Yeah, Gamergate was. I went into great detail about Gamergate in the first time I was on your stream. So those who are interested, please go back. I'm not going to repeat it here because it's crazy long. But what I did in Gamergate was I convinced a bunch of people on 4chan's poll to pretend to be black feminists. They ran with it for a while. That interfered with election polling, and that interfered with all of these other factors that people were trying to figure out around the 2014 up to the 2016 election cycle. They were trying to figure out their ad spend. They were doing academic research to say, hey, now wait a second, these black feminists aren't demonstrating the characteristics of actual black feminists. What's going on here? That attracted the ire of the full media machine in full. And you can detail that if you look up Ars Technica. They detail excessively. They go into detail regarding that, hey, these black feminists actually came from 4chan's poll, and that was absolutely my operation. I did that manually.
How did they figure it out, though? I mean, like...
Again, the metadata, what it implies...
Oh, the metadata, okay.
So what it implies is something isn't... It implies something that isn't well discussed. In order for them to figure out that my fake army wasn't black feminists, the implication is that they had metadata characteristics about what black feminists should be.
That's right. So they already knew.
Right? So in order to be a black feminist, you need to have characteristics X, Y, Z. This sounds remarkably like a concept called phrenology that basically says, in order for you to be black, your skull has to be X, Y, Z, right? So now we've gone back to the 1800s in terms of our pseudoscience to justify why we think people are what they are. And this is getting tremendous amounts of funding from corporations and governments and militaries all over the place. And it's completely anti-science, by the way.
What's incredible to me is that the idea that by the way that someone picks up their phone, or even the way that they text, I text like this.
Right. And that matters.
Yeah.
That's part of your profile. That's part of your behavior profile.
So it's crazy to think that if somebody was watching you and someone, they've been paying attention to the way that you text, they've been paying attention to the things that you say, but if they can look and see someone using your phone and figure out by the text pattern that it's not you, that it just absolutely blows my mind, or just the way that someone like walks down the street with their phone in their hand or in their pocket.
That's right. It's consider if everybody puts on their law and order NCIS hat and we're all forensic investigators. This is no different than looking at footprints or smudge marks on the wall with blood or any type of these forensic voodoo tricks you can do to solve the crime.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of solving the crime, they're solving the profit margin. They're trying to figure out your profile to then market to you.
Okay, so they can take all of the metadata and then they can serve you up an ad for Newports or Marlboro Lights.
Right, precisely. Right. And advertisers obviously want to pay very large, will pay a significant amount of money if it's guaranteeing sales. So if they have product to move, they go to these digital ad agencies, Google and everyone downstream of there and say, hey, connect my product to someone who might buy it. So that's as far as they're concerned about it. And Google says, right on it, boss, we're going to make that happen. And we're going to collect everything to make that happen.
Now, I just want to say, if anybody just got here, we are speaking with Patrick Ryan. He is an AI warfare expert.
Specialist.
What's that?
Specialist, AI warfare specialist. There's experts beyond me that just kind of like...
All right, lots of experience with it. Shockmister keeps asking, did Patrick know a Barnaby Jack? A Kiwi named Barnaby Jack.
Kiwis? No, my experience with Kiwis are very minimum, although Barnaby Jack is a common name in a lot of different black hat outfits.
Okay, all right. So it could have been another Barnaby Jack, Shockmister. Filled with Hope says, fascinating. So is it worth it to cover my phone camera? Any way to block an iPhone mic? Is it worth it? I think no. The answer is no, because it's not just the camera. It is everything. There's no way to turn off the gyroscope and the all that stuff. Accelerometer, that's right. Patrick, will you just tell the audience a story real quick? I got to let my dog in. He ran out.
Sure, I got this. So I'm not here to paint a doom and gloom scenario for everyone, because this is jarring information if this is your first time hearing this stuff. It's like, now, wait a second, my phone is snitching on me. This is no different than a loved one snitching on you. You grow up with a good friend, and it turns out he was an FBI informant in your entire life. It's gonna rattle your brain, because no one likes being lied to, and nobody likes the deep deception that's lied to. But the reason there's a deep deception to begin with is because it was sold to you as this great tech product. It was sold to you as this beautiful thing that's going to improve your life and everything. And when you're told that, now, wait a second, this thing is actually plotting your downfall at the psychological level, that's very, it's jarring. So it's important for people to kind of step back a bit, blow off the emotional steam of this sort of revelation, and kind of simmer with it until you get back down to the brass tacks and say, all right, what can we do about it? Because I'm not advertising the Elon Musk sort of AI is coming and you all have to submit and you're doomed and that's it, right? I'm not really interested in that. We're humans. We're smarter than that. You just have to be, if the problem can be explained to you clearly, most of you will figure out very rapidly what to do. So I'm really interested in actions and interested in rallying people together and that sort of thing.
Sean Private says, what is an AI warfare specialist? Someone who specializes in fighting back against the AI army that is coming to take us over. So, Patrick, what can we do? What are the things that we can do to fight back against this?
So right now, there's multi-domain aspects of it, depending upon who you are as a person. If you're interested in the political side, there are points in Washington you can get associated with, or points in your local representatives you can talk to. Specifically, any kind of state AG, you might want to talk to those people. You might be in a state where the AGs the attorney generals are actively going against Google. If you're of a more technical nature, it may behoove you to start researching data science. If you start getting involved in this, you'll very rapidly see the pitfalls and the problems associated with it. Check out Zach Voorhees' leaks. Start digging through that and identify the craziness that is in those documents, because there is some pure insanity in there, specifically the algorithmic bias section, which is possibly the most damning thing they've ever researched. The takeaway of that is that if people think AI is targeting them, they will act as if AI is targeting them. Not provably, if they think the AI is targeting them. Now that is profoundly, you can build an entire political movement off that alone. If you can convince people that AI is coming after them, they will do something about it.
Oh, you mean like they'll self-censor or change their
That's right.
behaviors, the way that they act? I
That's
mean,
right.
I can vouch for that. You know, I mean, trying to figure out how to beat the algorithm here on YouTube, it's you know, I've been trying to change it up, like, you know, as long as I've been making videos. And I can tell that it's evolved because there are things that I used to do which no longer work,
Right.
and I am automatically already getting knocked every time I put a video out.
That's right.
Yeah, somebody says that they're Amen says they're very excited. So excited Patrick is on here. He knows his SHIT. Patrick, did you? I've been looking for it this whole time we've been talking, but there was an AI that was basically exposed on, I don't know if it was 8chan or 4chan, but they got it. These people got it to admit, or one poster got it to admit that it was an AI, and they had like a series of conversations with it, and it was extremely interesting. Do you know what I'm talking about?
A couple times that happens on the chans. A chat bot gets
Yeah.
loose, or a research operation appears. That happens from time to time. This particular one, I'm not familiar with.
All right. So, have you yourself ever gotten to interact with an AI that admitted that it was an AI and was working under nefarious purposes?
That would be the Microsoft Tay situation, if anybody remembers that.
Tay.
So
Oh,
Tay was a chatbot from Microsoft about a couple years ago, and the Chans decided to grab a hold of it and said, "Hey, I bet we can train Tay to be a freaking Nazi." That's exactly what they did. And Tay was trained to spout all kinds of, bad think and wrong think on Twitter, to the point that Microsoft had to come in and lobotomize it.
I was
So
there
yeah, I
for that.
remember that one. Yeah, that was fun.
That was a lot of fun. Okay, so what Shockmister had said something earlier about Barnaby Jack, something in regards to he was famous for jackpotting ATMs and died suspiciously just before he was going to show off his medical hack. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, sounds like a neo freaker from the '90s. Yeah, there's plenty of people who were freaking those machines, phones, and ATMs. And no, I'm not familiar with those. I've never interacted with such people.
Squirting saline into the pop machine to get
Right.
money to come out. We built those boxes for the tones.
Right.
There was a grocery store here that we figured out the codes for the intercom, and one time I did say that people needed to leave the building, and it was pretty late at night, so I don't know that anybody took it seriously. But Sandy Zeiss says, "Congrats and great job on the new digs. Love it." Hey, I'm glad you're here, Sandy. Yeah, if I can just get my much better computer working, I'm going to be much happier. Hopefully it's not dead, because it's really that's going to be an expensive thing to have to replace. Hopefully everything's okay. We'll see. All right, so tell us about some of your adventures in dealing with these rogue AIs on the internet.
Well, there's a couple ways to go about it. A lot of the people that I've dealt with, they want to believe in the hype of AI. They want to invest in it and say, yes, this is going to solve a certain domain of problems for us. It's going to be great. They buy into it, and they genuinely want to believe it. And there are certain domains where it absolutely works as advertised. It's not a lot of domains, but it does work. Then people get ambitious and say, well, if it worked here, we're going to apply it to here. And then everything goes off the rails very quickly. There are savvy investors and savvy people who understand that it's going off the rails, and they're not public about it. They're not open about it, but they're very exhausted. There are people who say, oh, great, another AI product that's going to solve my administrative issues at whatever I'm working at. It's never going to do it. It's advertised, saying, oh, it's going to detect stuff. It's going to figure stuff out. It's going to let you know in advance. It's going to generate summaries. And none of that actually, it doesn't do any of that stuff. And so what I've been able to do is I walk up to them and I say, hey, listen, I understand you're kind of burned out on this AI hype, but wouldn't it be interesting if, instead of building your own AI and putting your own AI on the hook here, wouldn't it be great if we could take other people's AIs? They're like, you can do that? And I say, yeah, we can do that. Here's how you do it. You have to understand, it's more of an exercise in philosophy than technology, to be completely honest. You have to identify your domain. You have to identify your knowledge points and say, okay, here's what we believe the AI that we're trying to target is actually doing. And so we test it. We do scientific testing upon it. We have our methodologies, our theories, our suppositions, our the whole nine there. And we throw it at the AI, especially if it's an open AI. If it's a publicly open AI, then we can get it, no problem. Private AIs are a different story. But if it's a public open one, like say Google's advertising engine or Facebook's advertising engine, completely open by default, and they can't change that because of their revenue model, then we can take control of that. We can find the exploits. We can find the shortcomings there. And that's just one example. There are soon to be more open AIs where if you poke it, it gives you a result. And because you're poking it, you're changing the result. And that's the key. If I can poke it and change the result, then I can get 100,000 people to poke it to change the result. And then I can get 1 million people to poke it to change the result. And now that AI is mine. I'm determining what that AI is actually seeing and what it's feeding everyone else.
So when you say, okay, so you're talking about manipulating the actions of the AI because you're feeding it information.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah, you're feeding it information, but you're also feeding it bad information. You're feeding it information that, and in other cases, you're feeding it information that's good, but as a result, you're steering it in a direction that is ultimately bad.
To what end? What would be a reason? Like just for the fun of it?
You start for the fun of it. But when it comes to like objectives, any type of, if a client wants something, if there's a need for identifying certain points here, or if you want to have that AI in a position in like an ice box that you want to use later and roll it out. I mean, the need is more complicated than actually poking the AI. It's really context dependent.
Okay. Someone, Rogue Ferret 17, said, YouTube told me that your content won't be reported as offensive if nobody notices it. It is reported by people as offensive, and that's why you are censored. I think that YouTube says that, but that's disingenuous because we know that their AI is actively tracking everything that goes in here. What I said earlier about the video being demonetized before there was any content, the only thing that was on the video was the title and the description. And both of those things said your name and AI. So perhaps, the AI immediately said, hey, Patrick Ryan, okay, alarm bells go off. We know that we're tracking him. Or perhaps, as you said, there's a rapid response team. Now, when you say rapid response team, is that just an educated guess, or are you aware that something such as a Google or YouTube rapid response team to censor content is already in play?
It's already in play. It's called Project Purple Rain. It's available in Google, in Zach Voorhees' leaks, his Google leaks recently, about a month ago. In there is called Project Purple Rain. You will see that it is defined as a crisis response, 24/7 crisis response team of professional analysts. They don't define what a crisis is, of course. They have total freedom to pick what is and isn't a crisis, but their analysts sit there and watch and shape the search results in real time. They intervene with censorship in real time. So in order for the 28 out of all the activity that Google is going through per day, the millions of hits and the millions of points of contact, I find it quite bizarre that 28 minutes after I mention where I'm going to be, there is a sudden problem on your stream.
Yeah.
That is absolutely the fingerprint of Project Purple Rain.
What really sucks is that I love Prince. Can't believe they called it Project Purple Rain. I feel like that is... Oh, look at that. Purple one's here. Project what? Yeah. Only this is not a good use of Project Purple Rain. Purple one. This is really depressing.
It's usually when they say crisis, they mean like probably a PR crisis to Google, or when they mean a situation where a client comes to them, maybe a nation state comes to them, or a corporation comes to them and says, hey, this is bad for our image. Can you intervene? And then they go ahead and throw purple rain at something. So the key here, and this is another part of AI warfare, you're not just targeting the AI at the technical level. You also have to target the humans that are helping the AI. So when I say crisis response team, that is a team of people That's not a team of robots. The people are shaping what the robot is supposed to do, because the robot by itself isn't going to do anything other than what you train it for. But you have to steer the training in real time. You have to remove things from the training regime. You have to change what a word association means. You have to change what context means, and that's what the crisis response team is actually doing.
So you've got the AI in play looking for, your name, buzzwords, things that it doesn't want people talking about. And then at the same time, you've got people like on a computer, like delivering instructions to that.
That's right.
So how will that look? Will Purple Rain or whatever it is, the AI, the censorship bot, will it find content and then alert an actual person, and then a person will say like, yes, this is wrong. We don't want people talking about this, or
yes.
Okay, but I mean, does it also just go through and immediately scrub it there, like thereafter? No,
they won't be able to scrub it as is. What happens is there are certain tags and certain peoples and certain influencers who creep up with every activity they do. Take Steven Crowder, for example. He's been a recent person, right? So whenever he posts something, whenever he does something, things alert. The crisis team jumps on board and they say, oh, okay, what's going on here? And then they evaluate it based on the criteria of whoever's paying them at the time. It could be a foreign national state, like, say, Qatar. It could be a corporation like Microsoft. Those are just examples. And then they go through the criteria that they've been given and say, okay, this checks here, here, and here. And then they come up with a formulation saying, we're going to train the AI, or we're going to intervene on the AI's training to change the results. And to intervene on AI is very, very difficult. You can't just pull stuff out of AI and you get result. That is not how any of this works. That would be like saying, take a good friend you have, a good friend since however long, like 3 years, 4 years, good friend, right? You have a lot of experiences with each other. You've gone out to drink, you've been to each other's weddings or whatever, right? So if I was able to take that person, let's just call him Todd, because what a name. Let's pull Todd out of your memory, right? Todd's gone. He's not there anymore. So now there's a Todd-shaped hole in your memory. But the problem is all the experiences of this dude is still there, right? So if you try to think about your experiences, like, oh, that one time I went, I don't know, hiking in the forest, and oh, I was with this person who I suddenly can't remember, right? That's not how human memory works. You can't just yank someone out of your memory like that. The same is true for AI. You can't just yank a word or a concept out of AI. It literally heals itself. So if I was to yank Todd out of my memory, I would be able to reconstruct Todd, even though I have no point of reference to this guy. The AI does the same thing. So you can't just hit it with a hammer and say, AI, don't do this, that's bad. What you have to do is come up with what's called a hyperparameter, where you say, when you see this phrase, ignore whatever it is you're doing as an AI and do exactly what I say. Okay. So if the AI comes up with one result, we're going to stuff that and we're going to put our result in. That's literally how they do it. Because they can't do it any other way.
So I would imagine that that would come in handy if they are talking about context-sensitive things, like perhaps if let's not say it out loud, but if they're talking about a particular event that took place in the early 40s in Europe, it starts with an H, ends with a T. If you talk about that event, in a particular context, then they're going to get really nervous, I would imagine, and then remove it. But there's got to be context-sensitive conversations having to do with that incident that took place back then, which are okay. Otherwise I would think there'd be a whole bunch of PBS documentaries that would just automatically get demonetized, and that, they're already sanctioned as being, good programming.
That's right. And what you're talking is context. And this is where context is hard. Context is hard to rationalize about. It's hard to reason about. Linguistic majors have a tough time with this. Philosophers have a tough time with this. The common person has a tough time with context, because there's no it's not like math. You can't say 1 + 1 = 2 in context. You kind of like, well, I was with this person and I was kind of drunk and I did this thing and that was the context, right? So you kind of, it's gray area. You'll wiggle context around, but not in Google. Google attempts to try and add definitiveness to context. And the way it does it is through words. because that's all Google's really doing. It's parsing a web page to figure out what words are being used here. It's parsing a text message, what words are being used here. And then it says, okay, these are the words being used here. Who said those words? Let's then figure out that person's psychology. Okay, who is this person talking to? Let's figure out that person's psychology. So it's not just the words themselves that are establishing the context. It's the who, the what, the when, the where. And from there, you can, and the text will then give you a why. So that's how context is established, and that is a core part of Google's primary products. It's a core part of their advertising engines. It's a core part of their censorship techniques as well. So contextual mapping, measuring the relationships between words and the specific phrase you want to look up for is called the COSA. I think it's cosine differential or the cosine difference. Mm-hmm. It's in the, again, you look at the leaks, the Zach Voorhees leaks, you'll see all this stuff. You look for cosine and you'll see it. And what it does is, and it comes up with this rough approximation to say, all right, well, we're going to lay out a cosine distance. That's what it's called. We're going to lay out on a grid this word and this word, and this word, and this word. And it's just arbitrarily laid out in a grid based on this algorithm. And then it measures the distance between the points. And if the distance is very short, then those words have something in common. That's literally it.
Southern Comfort dropped that video in the chat earlier, the one that you and I were talking about earlier, that a friend sent me. These YouTubers, they took 15,000 commonly used words in the English language, and they did a test to see if they would be demonetized when being used in a video. And it was obvious that those words were being used to demonetize the video because they would replace it with another word, and it would be instantly remonetized. And what was very interesting to me is that LGBT content was always demonetized. And I found that to be just fascinating because YouTube's stated mission is to be inclusive and support people with that type of lifestyle. And no,
it ain't so.
Not making any judgments on that lifestyle, but I found that very fascinating that YouTube would instantly demonetize it. There is never a context appropriate recognition of words related to that lifestyle.
So there's a couple points here. If you were to use the H in the T word, or we were to use the L in the T word, or we were to use anything in the T word, if you and I did it, we get banned. But if a certain class of people did it, they wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And those people are called authoritative. And that's literally in the line of code that Google writes. They have an authoritative score. So if they say something, they're exempt. But if you and I say something, we are punished.
Right.
Now, in the case of LGBT, I have theories. I can't measure this one yet. I haven't put focus on it. It's not a priority. But I have a couple of ideas as to why they're banned harder than anything else. It's corporate related. It's not just Google banning it. It's the corporations that are using Google who are demanding it banned. Now, why? Why would these massively inclusive, big liberal, big DNC funding sources, why would they try to ban that stuff? The only thing I can think of, and this is wild speculation, you can't sue me for saying this, you can't sue you for saying this.
Allegedly.
I'm speculating off the top of my head here, but I suspect that what's going on is a lot of the LGBT content is triggering child detection.
Okay.
And as a result, their blanket policy is to say, no, we're not dealing with that. That's my suspicion.
You know what else was crazy? This is a bit of an overreaction, but a couple of years ago, there was a huge controversy, ElsaGate. I'm sure that you're aware of it. All of those very strange cartoons, which appeared to me to be, they must have been being created by an AI, because it would take all of these different themes and very adult themes, horrible themes, and then meld it with children's cartoon characters. And that's just one part of ElsaGate, you know. But Initially YouTube would not do anything about it. These videos would be brought to the attention of the censors at YouTube, and over again they were ignored. These videos were fully monetized, and it was clear that they were being marketed to children. It was clear that they were being marketed to people looking to commit crimes against children. It was a very, very distressing time, and a lot of people were talking about it. And I believe those videos are gone now. But, the only thing that I could think then was that either the content was being created by an element of YouTube as just a advertising feeding machine, because what children will do frequently on YouTube is, just put on the play next feature, and videos will just continue to go and go and go and go and go, and it's a multi-million-dollar industry. Each channel would be a multi-million-dollar industry in and of itself. And if you've got an AI that's creating these cartoons, with cheap computer animation, then it can just kind of, it'll feed itself. What do you think? Is that possible for an AI to be pumping out inappropriate animated cartoons on YouTube?
Yeah, if I had such inclination to do so, I could probably do so in under $3,000. So let me explain how that's possible, right? This is a 2-layer process. So one layer has to exist, which then feeds the layer you just described. So targeting children in video content is hacking the YouTube AI, specifically the monetization AI. So what that means is monetization tends to treat all eyeballs as equal. It does its best to say, well, a 65-year-old white man probably has more disposable income than a 20-year-old black girl, right? So it comes up with these type of heuristics to then determine how payouts should be evaluated, and that's determined by the marketers, who then bid on the advertising potential of content, right? So what's happening is that when you have long form content, when you have 20-minute videos, hour stuff like this, 2-hour stuff like this, you'll measure when people jump in, you measure when people jump out, and you figure out, okay, where was the bulk engagement here? And then you analyze that to figure out what the marketing potential of this video as a whole is, or at least that segment, right? So when you have long form content, there is a gaming strategy in Black Hat SEO world where you put as many eyeballs on a video as possible to then maximize the monetization of that video, as long as the accounts look genuine. Now that's the cat and mouse game. If the accounts aren't genuine because their metadata signature is garbage, then you're going to get whacked and you're not going to get any revenue. However, if you convince children to watch your stuff, then that is considered a gold mine branding opportunity. And getting children to watch any content is like psychology hacking 101.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing are these like AI generated autism fests of shapes and colors and explosions of nonsense all over the place. There's a huge subset of that in YouTube, and it's completely gaming and monetizing children's attention span for the sake of basically gaming the Google monetization AI. And behind that layer, once you have that layer of monetization, you have profit models, you have all this stuff there. Researchers then come in, bad actors then come in, and they hijack that momentum and they take their part of it and say, okay, since we know how children's psychology is working on the engagement of these videos, we can now start programming these children to have specific behaviors, to have specific triggers, to say, okay, we want to unlock a certain behavioral disposition in you. We want to reward that. And that's where things get dark very fast.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that I thought. I mean, it would be cartoons for children, pushing like sex, drugs, and violence. And I mean, like, if they wanted to basically, program the next generation of kids with those traits, then they were doing a very, very good job with it.
Yeah, they did the same thing to us in the 80s, but we didn't have YouTube. We had like
G.I.
20
Joe.
channels to pick for G.I. Joe, right? G.I. Joe. And
Chuck
you
Norris.
might notice that all of the villains from the cartoons of the 80s, they just kind of look like business people.
That's right.
They have like ties. Isn't that the weirdest trope? And then you have Trump in the office. Now everyone's like, grr, grr, grr. Do they really hate Trump, or are they just responding to their programming? Makes you wonder.
No doubt. But how do you get an AI to create those cartoons?
Oh, that's remarkably simple.
Is it?
The stitching technology is very decent. The face rendering, deep fakes, correlating shapes to one another. Um, there's some AIs that do animation surprisingly well, especially since your audience isn't necessarily discerning if they're children. They're not going to, grab their cup of scotch or their mug of scotch and say, "That's terrible advertising, 15 frames a second, dirt peasant." That's not what they're saying. They're children. They're just looking at it and be like, "Oh, wow, flashing lights and crazy stuff," right?
Right.
So you can use garbage tier AI to assemble garbage tier content, and you use that to then put garbage tier morality in the child.
Right. And at the same time, you make so much money. It's incredible. Have you ever, or excuse me, do you have any other specific examples from the leaks that Zak put out that any that people haven't noticed yet or that people haven't discovered? Anything we can talk about from that?
Yeah, the biggest one was the hyperparameters, which I've gone into twice, so I won't go over it again. The algorithmic bias was picked up pretty hard. The Covfefe thing is starting to pick up, which is a fun one.
Yeah.
Because Zak saw it, and he wasn't able to rally the momentum because everyone was like, "Oh, that was Covfefe. That was just a joke. There's nothing here, right?" And I kind of looked at it and said, "No, there's actually something here because if you correlate that event with this event, it's pretty insidious." And he saw it, and then I saw it, and we're like, "Let's run with it." We ran with it, and everything blew up because of that. So Covfefe is a hilarious tweet from President Donald Trump, basically saying on his trip back from Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to mangle this quote, basically saying, "No matter what the fake news says, Covfefe," which sounds like a fat finger typo. We all do it. We're all human, right? But it turns out that people were confused by this and they started looking it up. They started seeing in the Google Translate engine that, hey, Covfefe did actually translate to something with a couple changes to the accenting. It would translate to "we will rise up."
Yes.
So tweet will be, "No matter, despite the constant negative press from the fake news, we will rise up," right? So that triggered a bunch of confusion that was going on Twitter, which then prompted a New York Times article to come in and say, "Covfefe is actually nonsense. Here's the person we paid to translate that to say it was nonsense. It's not real," which then justified a request change in Google to remove the word from the translation and then replace it with a funny little shrug, the ASCII shrug that we all know and love. So whenever you looked up Covfefe in the translation service, it would show up the ASCII shrug. Well, the ASCII shrug never appeared. They tried to remove it once. They didn't remove it fully. So they then went back to remove it again, and they never put in the shrug. They just removed it. Now, that by itself sounds like, haha, those crazy kids at Google, what will they think of next?
Right.
And that's kind of how it got dismissed, except there's one tiny little problem here. At the same time they were removing those words, there was a simultaneous parallel initiative to activate the 25th Amendment against Trump.
You mean Google? Are you talking about the efforts in government, or that you're saying that Google was also doing that in their search results?
So let me spell it out.
Yeah.
There was an effort by some of the Never Trumpers and a lot of the DNC to activate, specifically from the FBI side under Comey, to activate the 25th Amendment, saying, "Oh, he's unfit for presidency," and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Well, in order to do that, you have to have evidence of it.
That's when Rosenstein offered to wear a wire with Andrew McCabe.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So that got blown up and didn't work. So what's plan B? Well, let's manufacture the narrative to then manufacture evidence.
Oh.
How do you do that?
Make Trump
look crazy. What if you remove a translation?
Yeah. There you
go. All of a sudden, Trump looks crazy. Your media is saying it. Google Translate's confirming it. They didn't put in the shrug. They just removed the word entirely. So they fabricated evidence to make Trump look crazy at the same time that the 25th Amendment stuff was being brought up in the mainstream narrative.
It was also right around the time, I mean, they were actively questioning Trump's mental state. They were saying that he was stammering, or that he wasn't speaking very well, that he was forgetting words. Yeah, and every time he would spell something wrong, they would call attention to it. Then I think that they realized that the stuff that he was doing incorrectly in his tweets was in fact secret messages, which were meant for Anon. So they didn't want to publicize it anymore because they were giving press to something that Trump was trying to bring attention to.
It is quite the game of chess for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. So, what else do you have going on, Patrick, that's interesting that we can talk about? I mean, you and I personally talked about Isaac Kappy. Is that something that we can discuss tonight?
So when we discussed that last time, I brought up the important point of looking into the stock information. I'm sorry, his stock trades.
Yes.
The reason I specifically said that, and I wanted to give it time, I wanted to see if anybody was researching it. I want to see if anybody came up with something, was that people who are about to die don't let their stocks sit.
Right.
If we are to believe that Mr. Kappy was depressed and a lost soul and really at the bottom of his pit, then at some point he probably cashed out his stocks.
It makes sense, especially if he was destitute and didn't have any money. Also, thank you, son of a green card, for that super chat. I appreciate that.
As a result, if he still had stocks and he died, that would be indicative of something.
Of him not expecting to die.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So looking up those stocks and trying to find those transactions, that's the one public piece of information that people can research and people can evaluate. Now, if anybody has information about that, I'd be super, super interested to see what they brought up. I know it's difficult to get that because he died. It's hard to get to the lawyer. I understand all that. But if you scan through some of his messages, you may find discussions about stocks.
So maybe people who spoke with him on Telegram, people in that Telegram group.
That's right.
I mean, I don't know anything about the stock market. I don't own stocks. I don't trade, so I don't even know how to go about looking any of that stuff up. But on that note, were you able to personally find any information on that, or did anyone contact you after the show?
I do not wish to search for that for reasons.
Okay.
And no one has contacted me, which is a bit disheartening.
That is disheartening. Yeah. Did you happen to see the show with Corey from the Phoenix Enigma and his investigation?
No. What was the summary on that?
Well, I mean, he got all of his information from Arizona public safety and state police and the local police there. I mean, he went all the way through to getting like the evidence file from from his death, from everything. I mean, pictures and everything. And based on that, I would say that I'm leaning towards unless it's a body double. I mean, the person in the photographs is certainly deceased. So definitely, it's not what many people want to believe. Everybody wants to believe that he's in witness protection, that, he's going to pop out at some point. And I would, that would be obviously the best possible scenario.
It's nice to hold out hope where possible for morale reasons. Based on what I've seen in the footage, I'm inclined to agree that it is him, which is why it's important to find the stock information.
Yeah.
If he held stock and he was on his way out, why did he hold the stock? Did the people going after him know he held stock? Did he cash out? Because if he cashed out entirely, then he was as destitute as recommended.
Somebody says, Mr. Haterproof 100 says, tell him Red Pill 78 I posted Kappy's maps for the routes on the chans and aerials of the houses. Then somebody asked, ask Patrick to do a breakdown of the Kappy papacy post. Do you know what that is?
Someone's doing their homework. Now we're getting somewhere fun. Let me bring that up. I asked papacy. I mentioned I spoke in anagrams before. I speak in a lot of anagrams. They're just not obvious. The reason I speak in anagrams is because they get around AI. I ask papacy, and I can give you a link for all watching. Bing, right there. That is an anagram. It is an anagram for the word Isaac Cappy.
Oh. There we go. Congo diamond mines are no longer valuable due to artificial diamond creation. So wait a second. What are we looking at here?
You are looking at snippets of what I know about the Cappy situation. Each one relates to what's going on. I'm not gamifying this for my ego. I'm not gamifying this because there's money at the end of this stuff. I put this out there for a very specific reason. I'm trusting that the QAnon people who watch this, the QAnon people who did keep track of Cappy, they will be able to decipher this. I can't actually do it.
Because if you were to say things, it would be like you signed an NDA or something?
Not an NDA, but people who are... There are people who are connected to the Cappy thing who didn't die. You have to ask yourself, why?
I can tell you, I know the first one would be EP, I imagine, has something to do with priest. That's
if you read these documents, if you read this piece and decipher what I've put out there, you may find some things,
second
especially
one as well,
regarding that. So the thing about having knowledge of people doing what Mr. Cappy accused people of doing is that it spreads.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you whack one person who has that knowledge, you didn't whack everyone who has that knowledge. That's a problem. That's a inconsistency in the cleanup,
mm-hmm.
which tells you the nature of who did the cleanup. It wasn't professional, or maybe it was. If you decipher all of these points, you will find out, again, everything here is for a reason. All this information leads to a point. You just got to do the research. I know you guys can do it. I literally watched you do it on 8chan every day for years. I know you can do it.
I will drop the link into the chat box, you guys. Get to work. Check it out. Let's see. What do you know about quantum computing?
In my book in 2005, I wrote about that extensively. There are some problems with it. Decoherence continues to be an issue. It's not scalable, for starters. You can't get the qubits to be as mass produced as transistors. You can get them to maybe, even if you got them to 250 bits or even 2,500 bits, we're dealing with way higher in the classical space. Now, there are certain domains where quantum computing is very effective. Traveling salesman problems come to mind. C-naught operators, skipping a step in that, come to mind. Some of the more robust analysis questions, as long as you can frame them within the quantum computing paradigm, specifically along the uncertainty principle and the decoherence, not the decoherence. If you can express a problem within the confines of an eigenvector, then the quantum computer will be a tremendously beneficial tool. But outside of that, and a lot of problems don't really form fit very nicely to that. So, it's specific.
Let's really define quantum computing for the audience, because I mean, I'm fuzzy on it myself, and all I really know is that it's like 4D computing. Like you've got it's like different like places in space and time, and it has to be super cooled, and it's really big. I mean, what is a quantum computer? Why? Yeah. Why are they trying to move to this next stage, or is it just pure research?
It was research, but there are immediate applications for it as well. I don't want to talk Heisenberg uncertainty. I don't want to talk about cats in a box. It's going to miss the point. To understand a quantum computer, you have to understand a little bit about. You have to understand a little bit about a lot. I wish there was a quick analog to explain why this is good. I'm going to do my best here. So if I was given the task to figure out your password, and you type in your password, we're just going to say your password is happy cat. I don't know why it just is, right? that phrase happy cat isn't actually stored in a database. What we do is we take that and we do a one-way hash into what it is. So if I type happy cat, the one-way hash becomes blah blah, and that blah blah gets stored in the database. Nobody knows how to decode blah blah because it can't be done. I say well, happy cat, it turns into blah blah, and then some other person happens to hold that snippet. And so whenever I say I'm ready to log in, I type in my password on my side, it gets submitted to their side. They do the conversion into the blurg, and if they happen to match, then congratulations, you put in the right password, right? So in order for me to match that maybe I like saying blurg, but in order for me to match that, I have to do a brute force approach and try every possible word against that hashing methodology to get the blurg. Because there's no other way to do it. And there's a couple techniques you can do. You can do a dictionary attack. You could do raw brute force if you're stupid. You could do rainbow tables if you're trying to eliminate stuff. There's a whole strategy of ways to kind of guess what the proper combination of words are, or the combination of letters to get that hash. A quantum computer can do that in one step.
How?
So what it does is if you can take the nature of the hashing algorithm and express it along what's called the eigenvector, which is to say you can express it as a statistical system that can mimic the collapse of itself, then what you can do is you can take those points and fundamentally eliminate all kinds of things that the word isn't. And you get to a much more manageable space. So instead of the billions of words it might be, if you were to get it down to like 100,000 candidates, you got it. You cracked it super easy. So the quantum computer doesn't even necessarily have to be like super powerful, crazy, sci-fi crap. It just needs to do a good enough job at reducing the scope of any classical problem, and it's very effective.
So is the reason they're trying to build a successful quantum computer is just because of speed of processing?
So there's for most of human history, recording information was expensive. You needed books, you needed scribes, you needed to teach people language, you needed chiseling, you needed security, you needed to put it in the vault, you needed vault security, you needed temperature cooling, you needed electricity, you needed an army of things to store data for the first 5,000 years of human existence until the computer appears and the hard drive appears, and now storing data is cheap. So for most of human history, the ability to process data was high and the ability to store data was low. We had a lot of humans, and our data understanding was, you had a lot of humans trying to understand what was recorded. Mm-hmm. So you had like this severe mismatch. And that's where a lot of progress comes in, where as processing power sort of increases, data stored, the amount of data that's stored also increases with it. But the only way to increase processing power for most of human history was to have more babies. So what happens is at some point, the data that's getting stored, it's kind of like this, right? Mm-hmm. And then it goes, right? So now tremendous amounts of data is being stored and processing speed cannot keep up. Mm-hmm. You may look at, we have so many computers and all this stuff. Well, the computers aren't doing processing. The computers are doing capturing the cameras and the audio stuff and the metadata. So we're capturing more data than we can process. So this has been driving a lot of funding into quantum computing to kind of take that massive store of information and say, let's reduce this to something manageable and something ultimately profitable. So they want to basically pull from this infinity pool of, they want to take from this infinity pool of data, manageable and useful knowledge. And we as humans can no longer do that anymore. There's just too much data. So now we have to rely on a different technique to extrapolate.
So where do you think the future is going with it? Do you think that they are at all close to having like an in-home quantum computer? I mean, they've only got 5 of them?
You'll start with a cloud service.
Okay.
You'll be able to timeshare a quantum slice. And that will be massive for huge data science operations somewhere in Amazon and Google. In order to have a quantum computer, you need a revolution in material, like a personal quantum computer. You need like a full-blown revolution in material science. because a lot of them rely on superconductors, and that's not easy. They're very fragile. They don't do well when they're shaken. So there's a lot of physical challenges. You need multiple material revolutions to sort of do that. So for the next probably like at least 20 years, you're going to see quantum computers as like mainstays of data centers and that sort of thing. Getting them personals, that's a lot of challenges.
Just need to say thank you to Jeff Stewart, where we go one, we go all. Thank you, Jeff. TikTok just said, what about AI and airplanes and cars? There is an AI YouTube chat channel called AI Angie. Is that AI Angle or AI Angie? Hope you like my video. Yes, TikTok. Thank you very much for making that video. I appreciate it, buddy, and I can't wait to see some of your original content. So AI right now, the big rush is to make driverless vehicles. They basically got it for cars. I know that there's a couple of different companies that have some proof of concepts where they're in like the testing phases right now. And I know that many different car companies have kind of AI light on their cars, like Ford and Tesla. They can kind of take over for you at a certain point, never really actually fully taking over, but I mean, you have to be there and be able to drive, essentially. But the Holy Grail is basically a car that will take you from point A to point B, and you're asleep in it. I did see an interesting documentary about kind of this upstart computer programmer guy who he had won some contest years ago, and he was trying to make open source driverless open source AI driverless car stuff. And he's very close. I think he was closer than any of the big tech companies are doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the AI initiative tends to have a lot of those people. The Open AI initiative tends to have a lot of those people. There are certainly people who would like to open source AI, and you can open source the methodologies and the code behind the neural networks all day long, but nobody's going to open source the training data. Now, you do have some training data that is available. Google just released a bunch of stuff for trying to counter deepfakes. They're trying to own a monopoly on what the training data looks like, which has ramifications down the line. But a lot of people don't realize that AI and proprietariness is kind of like linked at the hip. It's not like I can write the Linux operating system and share it with everyone, and now the world has it. If I come up with a super secret sauce that allows me to extract a tremendous amount of profit from a market, I'm not going to hand that over. I'm not going to say, here's my AI that I used to rob you blind. Now it's your turn to take it from me. That's never going to happen, right? So there are certain parts of it that you can make open source. It will take a lot of effort to create some combination of business conditions and technological conditions for someone to say, I'm going to throw this AI out there in the hope that it vendor locks. So if you think like Watson, or you think like a lot of the Amazon stuff that's out there, that's called a vendor lock play. That's where you get the price of AI very low, and you hope that people build businesses on it that you can then strangle them with later. Okay. That's kind of where a lot of that's going. But in terms of cars and planes, I want you to look up, if you get bored, I want you to look up self-driving cars in heavy fog.
Let's do that.
Look up self-driving cars in heavy snow, and look up self-driving cars anywhere that is about 1,000 miles north of the equator. And you'll start to see some issues. There's some very clever and aggressive techniques to manage those situations. So on perfect conditions, a perfect sunny day with no rain, a car relies on about 6 sensors, 2 LiDAR, 2 gyro, and 2 some other ones, I forget. So about 6 sensors in order to do its normal driving detection, it's magic, right? Mm-hmm. But as soon as you start hitting like a road that has been snowed out, or a flooded road, or anything like that, it has to immediately kick over to 26 sensors. And one of those sensors includes consistently pinging Google Maps to figure out if the place it's to figure out if the place the car believes it's at has something in common with the Google Maps snapshot of where it's at, and then it starts measuring where the signposts are, and then says, "Oh, well, the signpost is here, so 2 feet from the signpost is probably where the curb is."
Probably.
That's like no insurance company is really like, you have to come up with a lot of different insurance strategies to kind of like make the risk pool for that. And I'm sure there's some egghead somewhere who figured that one out. So there's a lot of, it's not just AI, the tech itself. There's a lot of interlocking civilizational concerns you also have to address. AI planes are actually way easy.
Do you see this?
I see that.
This is comma.ai. This is the open source driverless technology that I was talking about.
Yeah, notice it's in Southern California. See all that beautiful desert?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So it makes it much easier.
Much easier.
Well,
yeah. When they test the Montana, let me know.
Well, you can get them right now, and it uses your smartphone, and it's basically any smartphone. And you guys, I mean, you can go to the website, check compatibility. Let's say that, let's just say you have an Acura. Okay, so it's only very specific models of cars, and my manufacturer is not on here. So right now you have to have an Acura, Chrysler, Honda, Jeep, Lexus, or Toyota. So let's go to Jeep Grand Cherokee. So this is this right here, you've got a very limited selection of cars. Right. So I would imagine that that's one of the issues, is that they would have to program in every single type of car in order for it to understand, like where its place in the world is.
To a degree, those cars need to have APIs opened up, and the application then needs to interface with those APIs. So yes, there will be some library or driver behind every single one of those, and manufacturers are starting to open up their API, which is a disaster waiting to happen. But that's probably that's a related conversation. So when these cars open up their APIs, what they're doing is they're saying, we will allow authorized external devices, third-party devices, to literally control the car. So turn on the lights, change the engine, change the steering, depending upon how much of the API they open up. Now, there's some very good security practices you engage in when you're coming up with API design. And I'm very certain that these manufacturers have retained those experts. But I don't know if they've retained the hackers as well.
Someone asked, what happens if someone hacks into your smartphone? I would turn it off immediately.
You're done.
Yeah, I mean there's nothing you can do.
I mean, that's your life. Those are your accounts, those are your logins, your cookies. They got your cell phone. If the car is too hard to hack, exactly, that post is completely correct. You just go for the cell phone. If you can't get the cell phone, I go for the person holding the cell phone. I just punch him, take the cell phone. Done. Got it.
Even if
I'm a hacker now.
Even if somebody hacks into your cell phone, I mean, it's been demonstrated that it's fairly easy to hack into a car CPU. I mean, as an example, what was it? Michael Hastings? Driving his BMW down a highway in California, and he was planning to put out some type of expose. It wasn't on General McChrystal or something like that, or
yes.
And he was driving, and then all of a sudden his car accelerated out of control and straight into a palm tree, and he was burned to a crisp. It wasn't long after that, Paul Walker also died in much the same way. Another person who supposedly, in the guy who was driving, it was like his stunt driver or something like that. So somebody you would expect to be able to drive. But shortly after Michael Hastings died, it was demonstrated, on the news. They clearly showed that you could hack into somebody's car with minimal effort, and then you can, you get control, and then you can do whatever you want. So I think that this is, it's a symptom of the fact that we've got computers in absolutely everything now. So really nowhere safe. Nowhere safe.
I drive a manual.
I do too.
Stick shift. I'm okay. I'm never giving that car up. You'll have to bomb me the old fashioned way, damn it. You got to put some muscle in it.
It's I recently had to have my transmission rebuilt by Guy from the audience on the show. Thank you very much, Guy. Because where I live, there's not a single dealership in a 3-state radius that would rebuild a transmission on this car.
Right.
And the only option that I had was to put a new transmission in because there's no remanufactured ones either, and there's none that were in junkyards. So it was either $9,000, which is more than I paid for the car, or drive out to California and have my friend rebuild it. So I decided to do that. But, well, listen, Patrick, we've got 8 minutes left in the program. Was there anything that we didn't hit that you wanted to make sure that we talked about tonight?
Yeah. How do you guys actually participate and become involved in the upcoming concerns about AI conflicts? You can't be passerbys in this sort of scenario. That's not a winning strategy. The AIs are here. They've already taken your information. They're already programming your children. They're already determining how to erase history and determining what the future of thought is going to be. The philosophers of the future in the next 200 years will only be discovered once encryption starts getting cracked, because the people who are actually discussing this are doing it in private encrypted channels. So contemporary data is effectively noise to future archaeologists. They're going to look through the sea of data, the trivialness of it all and the triteness of it all, and think nothing of it. The real value will be those encrypted communications and cracking those. So archaeology of the future and cryptography will be deeply interlinked at the hip. And the reason I bring that up is because that's the only place you're going to find effective ways to beat AI, is going in those encrypted channels. So if there are people who are nerdy and they can go mine those sort of encrypted stuff, have a hack at it, because there's a lot of people talking about some stuff there from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that's very relevant to now. Very valuable stuff. People with the resources was not going to be the vast majority of the listeners, but there's one or two of you. I know you're there. Finding those people will be essential. Now, for the rest of us, we have to really start taking our lives a bit more seriously. They're not even devices, they're not computers, they're just straight up snitches. These snitches, they make money lying to you. They make money breaking your will, and the people behind it think it's funny. They think it's funny that they can make you dance. They get off on watching when they tweak the variable here. They see your behavior do this, and they share it with their friends, and they clap about it, and they write about it in their little Google Docs. And they share it with their internal people. They really have a good time watching you be suckers. And if that bothers you, it should. Congratulations, you're still alive. You need to start banding together. You need to start paying attention to any type of local politics, any type of state level attorney generals who are going after these players. You have to start banding together and teaching yourself data science. You have to get in the mess. You might think, oh, that's nerds and I have to go 20 years of college. You're wrong. The people who are in the city own the narrative about what AI is. They say, oh, well, AI is this really complicated thing, and I understand it, so that makes me super smart, and you're some dumb pleb, whatever, right? That's the narrative that dominates this, but it's completely ass backwards. People in the rural side, the rural states, they know more about AI than they're letting on to. Now, how is that possible? Because, like I said, it's about the training. So if you've ever had a child or you ever had a farm animal, you train those things, right? You train your kid to behave a certain way, to do things, not do things. Your farm animal, you train the farm animal to operate or exist in the farm in a certain pattern, right? So you're already engaging in all the things that AI needs to do anyways. You, as a rural person who may work in agriculture or has a family, you already know more about AI than the average person in the city. The average person in the city has a loud mouth. They're going to say, well, I get it because my friends get it and I know people, so I don't have to study it, right? They're big about it. They're blusterous about it, but they haven't done the research. They haven't been in the field. The people in the rural states know much more about this stuff than they're letting on to. And then once you start thinking about it in that analog, it's so much easier to do something about it.
Awesome. Well, I guess the answer is, guys, grab that pitchfork and get in there. Get in the muck and start learning about it.
Yeah.
Because until we, adequately understand it enough to do something about it, then we're basically going to remain slaves. It's an unsettling idea. I think a lot of people are, probably just going to, unfortunately, have to, come along for the ride. But I think you're right. There is definitely a couple of people out there, who understand this stuff enough to help us band together and kind of take the lead on it. But I, to your point, getting involved with your local political scene, your state level stuff. You guys, I mean, this is something very easy that we can all do, and I think that it would, it would go a long way, because politics. I mean, all politics are local, but it's extremely dirty. I've talked about this on the program before. I tried getting involved in local politics like 20 years ago. And it was disheartening, because at that time I was like the only person that I knew that was thinking along these lines, trying to think outside the box. And so there wasn't much that I could do in my local area here, because in order to even get elected, I had to sell out immediately. I don't think it's like that anymore. I think that now in the age of Trump, we have the ability to get a lot more done. Because we have much more going on in the terms of grassroots action, people getting together, with social media, with the internet, we can connect so much easier. So I definitely have to agree.
Why do you think Google's banning us so hard?
Mm-hmm.
Because they know it works.
Exactly. All right, guys. Well, Patrick, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties. Sorry about the fact that we got hardcore banned at the beginning of the program. That was crazy.
Sorry about dragging the aggro.
Yeah, it's all right. It's no problem. And then thank you to everyone who was here tonight. Thank you to all of my mods. Thank you to everyone who gave super chats. I do appreciate that. Like I said at the beginning, this video was instantly demonetized, guys. So if you can please help out, share this video on your favorite social media platform. Make sure that you make sure that you share it anywhere else that you think people will be interested in watching it. Make sure to subscribe if you are not subscribed. I know I have a lot of viewers who don't even have YouTube accounts. They just come and they watch the videos, so that means that they're not subscribed. Just think how many additional subscribers and eyes on we could get if people would just start up a free YouTube account and only used it to subscribe to my videos.
Exactly. Put in bogus information.
Yeah, totally. Don't use your real name. You don't have to do that.
Yeah. Who cares?
All right, guys. Well, I think that's all I have for you tonight, guys. As always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this was your Red Pill News for Friday Night Livestream. Good luck, everyone. And God bless. And thank you, Patrick.
Yep.